Now, when they pulled
Yeah,
down the statue in in front of the KGB in Moscow in 1991
there
of
we go.
Dzerzhinsky, the founder of the KGB, I mean that was glorified, of course, right? And when they tore down the statue of Saddam Hussein, of
Yeah.
course that was all it was all orchestrated.
Or
But
Gaddafi, how when they
Oh yeah,
murdered
right,
Gaddafi, that
right.
they took his body and they sodomized him
oh
and
yeah,
oh
Right.
God.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
that was celebrated. That
that's
was
Right.
okay, right?
celebrated by
Because
And
the
that was
West.
they're freedom fighters if they're on our
yeah.
side. They're terrorists if they're on the other side.
And we
Which
can
is
get into just like not only the we can get into the incredible stupidity of that because of course then in North Korea he looks at Gaddafi, who we had made deals with and who had reformed and given up his weapons and apologized for some terrorist acts and whatever and was behaving.
Yep.
And that's how he ended up. So of course North Korea is like, well, I got to get a weapon and
right,
I
right,
have
of course.
I have to armor myself and of course that's going to be the reaction. It's just how can our leaders be so stupid about
And
something?
not just
The
that,
simple
but I'm sure that
concept.
they also look at the situation with Russia, right?
No.
And Kim Jong Un, he has to look at the situation with Russia, and he has to say the only reason why the U.S. doesn't try to just clearly invade Russia, or you know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
they still have to go and try to play all these war games with Russia, is because they are considered a nuclear our nemesis when it comes to being a nuclear power, right? And
Yeah.
so obviously he sees that and he's like, well, the smart thing to do is to at least pretend like I'm doing something with my nukes, you know?
Well,
Yeah. Yeah.
after the Russian Revolution, we supported the there was a fight between the Reds and the Whites after the Bolshevik Revolution, and the Whites were the conservatives, and they were supported by the U.S. and the British, and they were fighting basically to reimpose the if not the monarchy, at least a conservative type of parliamentary government, so the U.S. has a track record of supporting overthrow of government in Russia, which leads me to
Yeah.
my Moscow
Yeah.
minute.
Yes.
Well, I hate to say it, but Russia is up to no good again. Did you read the latest? They're not only were they, first of all, they were trying to kill soldiers in Afghanistan, but that somehow that didn't stick, right? So now
Yeah.
they have a new
Didn't work.
one. They're 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 hacking into COVID-19 vaccine labs, and they're stealing our vaccine,
Oh yeah.
which we
Oh,
don't
did
have yet.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh my.
Yeah.
God
Oh,
forbid they're going to steal our
yeah.
vaccine, because our pharmaceutical companies deserve to make a lot of money from that vaccine. And if they steal it, they might sell it. I mean, can you imagine if they sell it and a lot of people get it and they get cured and everything? Then there'd be no market for the pharmaceuticals.
Well, Russia needs a piece of that
Man.
$3,000 a treatment for remdesivir. They need a piece of that too,
I guess
Mama,
so. I
Mama
guess so.
Russia.
Well, needless to say, I'm being a little sarcastic here, but the question, it raises the whole question of like, why shouldn't the research just be open research? Why is it being protected? And it wasn't even like they were trying to sabotage the research or like do something to make the vaccine poison for U.S. citizens or something. They're just trying to they're accused in the New York Times of stealing research. Okay.
But
So,
I
so,
don't
so,
understand
so
why. I don't understand why they wouldn't just get the. Doesn't Cuba have the
Yeah,
vaccine
well, that
or the
doesn't matter. I mean,
treatment?
the whole narrative is Russia's up to no good, and they're trying to
right.
steal our stuff, and they're hacking into our system. So anything bad, blame it on Russia. Okay.
This would tie everything all together, starting with our election discussion earlier. That Biden says he's getting intelligence, and the
Well, that's
Russians
good.
are,
He
and the
needs
he
intelligence.
needs intelligence, and the Russians are hacking our election. They're looking to hack the coming up. So are they setting the stage to declare it invalid? Are
Well,
they? I mean, what's going on there?
the New York Times article cited uh, uh, I forget who it was, but they basically referred to the election fraud of 2016. So they're still playing that RussiaGate
Yeah.
narrative.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do is draw a historic parallel between and kind of in memory and honor of John Lewis, who just passed away, of the
Yep.
civil rights movement, because in the 60s, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI, from the 20s until the 70s, I mean, almost 50 years head of the FBI, who was uh, basically trying to crack down on the civil rights movement. So on the one hand, the FBI is going and arresting, white supremacists in the Freedom Summer of 1964 in the South, who were murdering civil rights workers. But on the other hand, the FBI was conducting surveillance on Martin Luther King with the approval of Robert F. Kennedy, by the way, who was the Attorney General under John F. Kennedy, and then for a short time under LBJ. So it wasn't just the Republicans. I mean, Hoover was a Republican, but it was there was surveillance going on against this movement of which I guess he called it. They called it Black nationalist hate groups, and that was Hoover's term. I forget what his exact term, but he considered them to be supported by communists, and they were a communist threat. So Russia was somehow involved with this because there were some communists, members of the Communist Party that Martin Luther King had dealt with at some point. So there was a connection there. And Hoover could say that, well, this whole movement is basically a communist insurgency, and it's basically they're destroying the civil order, right? So you can have maybe some mild civil rights reform, but we don't want a real revolution. We don't want people really changing things too much. So they were seen as a threat. And there's a whole program called COINTELPRO, which was basically a counterintelligence operation where they did the surveillance. They would also they would spread rumors about civil rights leaders. They would actually outright murder civil rights leaders like Fred Hampton, basically. So there was a whole campaign. While they're supposedly protecting law and order, on the other side, they're also trying to destabilize this group, which was considered a threat, especially once Martin Luther King went against the Vietnam War. That was the real threat, 1967. And he gave a speech at Riverside Church in New York on April 4th, 1967, exactly 1 year to the day before he was assassinated. So that was when things got really serious. But there was this whole historic parallel of blaming Russia for these public unrest and trying to divert attention from legitimate claims, right? So I mean, I think whether it's you're blaming people attacking our history by pulling down statues, or I'm surprised they haven't pulled the Russia card yet on the protests, but I assume that's coming.
No, they did. They did already. They did say that it was that all of this unrest was being fomented by Russia.
So
that's what
there was
RT.
a
That's why they use RT as a
right.
Russian propaganda arm.
Right.
Which,
it's not because every other outlet is U.S. government state propaganda, and so where else have we got to turn?
Yeah. Well, not just that, but the fact that that a lot of people end up turning to RT to actually get stories about environmental issues that are going on in our country, or just like social justice problems that are going on in our country that our media doesn't talk about, but that RT does openly talk about.
Right.
So, and one question that this raises too, like blaming Russia for everything. What's the motivation? Because assuming that, okay, I mean, even if Russia did offer bounties, which there's no evidence of it for the Taliban.
It was debunked already. That story was debunked.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, it was pretty much, to excuse the phrase, peanuts, because like basically, like 4 soldiers were killed, which is tragic, but there's no clear-cut evidence that it was Russia bounties.
It's in our American DNA somehow to be afraid of that, for that to scare us. I mean, people are still absolutely convinced that Hillary spoke complete truth about Russia and all that, even though Cold Strike in the House testimony, that was turned over said, no, we have no real evidence that Russia was involved in hacking the DNC server. I mean, all this stuff came out of that testimony that there was no evidence. All the key players admitted they went on TV and lied about it.
Right.
The
Exactly.
Steele dossier, which
And the
is what
Steele
this whole
dossier,
thing has been built off of, right? The
Yes,
whole
yes.
Russiagate scandal was built off of that intelligence from that dossier. And recently, in a lawsuit, Steele lost in court because he had to admit that he didn't actually get this information from any Russians. That he just had some sources or whatever, and he didn't check any of their information. He knew that he was working for Hillary Clinton. It was all of this stuff has come out in court, and it doesn't fucking matter.
People, yeah, I don't know. It's a combination of just people wanting that big story, that big science fiction story or spy novel story, and just not paying attention to the right sources.
So here's my take on this. We always need a boogeyman to justify this, military spending, right? And this whole oppression, it all has to be justified. We can't afford to have, increased Social Security. We can't afford medical care or whatever for everyone. So first, and I think terrorism is kind of on the wane right now. So we had to bring Russia back into the picture because we need the boogeyman, and Russia, and China personally serve as the boogeyman right now. And I was interesting.
But also, I'm sorry,
ahead.
real quick. Hillary also needed an excuse, and all those lobbyists and people that work for Hillary need an excuse, right? And what do? You swift boat. You blame the thing which can be pinned on you on the other guy, right?
Yep.
So she had done all these dealings with Russia via the Steele dossier and all this uranium stuff.
The uranium deal, right?
So what you do is you accuse the other guy of what you're guilty of. So it serves a million purposes, just like you were saying.
I mean, both parties are using this strategy. I mean, Trump is somehow portraying Biden as a leftist, socialist. I mean, it's just
that's actually my conspiracy minute.
Okay, then I'll leave that for you. Well, I have a good segue into that because just for thinking conspiratorially, Werner von Braun said, who was presciently said back in the 60s, said there are three enemies. The first enemy is going to be communism. Second enemy is going to be terrorism. And the third enemy is going to be the extraterrestrials. And remember the Tic Tac video from 2018 and 2018 where they released so the government has admitted that there are these things flying around in the sky that they don't know what they are, and they're obviously not reflective of current state of technology, so they don't know what they are. So just keep that in the back of your mind that
they could pull that out.
They could pull that out, and it'd be like Independence Day all over again. So, anyways, okay, let's go. They
need their Space Force, right?
We need a Space Force.
Yes, we need it. That's right. We need justification for Space Force. That's right.
But I think if the aliens have made it all the way here from whatever star system, I don't know if we really stand a chance.
No. They made it over to our little anthill here, and
right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.